Good evening, everyone. Hello. Hi, I'm Carrie Coogan. I'm Deputy Director for the Kansas City Public Library, and we're so thrilled to have you all here tonight. Thanks for being here. So I have a few quick announcements before we get started tonight. If you haven't heard the news yet, we're having a book festival and an anniversary birthday party here. Yeah, that's exciting news, right? Not together, but close. So this October 6th and 7th, right here at the Downtown Central Library, in partnership with the Missouri Humanities Council and the Library of Congress Center for the Book, we're hosting the first annual Heartland Book Festival right here. More details are to come, but I promise you that it's going to be fun and there will be something for everyone. And we are also hosting Ari Shapiro from National NPR as one of our guests, and there's going to be many guests on that Saturday, so stay tuned. And then in December, we're celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Kansas City Public Library. Thank you, thank you. We are so excited and have many events and activities planned for the entire year, 2024, and we want you to be a part of the great celebration of this wonderful institution. So we'll keep you up to date on all of those things coming up. So we are happy to be live streaming this event, and for those of you at home, welcome. And if you'd like to ask a question, please place it in the chat and we will add it to the in-person Q&A here. And for those of you who would like to ask a question, we'll have microphones set up and you can come and ask an important question at the microphone. And we ask that you please use the microphone so that everybody who's at home can hear your question as well. Okay, now for our event today. Just a few minutes south of the celebrated intersection of 18th and Vine Streets, some of the most notable chapters in Kansas City's Black history spring from a single block on Montgall Avenue. There, in the first half of the 20th century, lived Chester Franklin, founder of one of the city's and the country's leading African-American newspapers, The Call. The publication's trailblazing editor and civil rights standard bearer, Lucile Bluford, resided nearby, and you're going to hear about many others as well tonight. In a discussion of her new book, Kansas City's Montgall Avenue, Black Leaders and the Street They Called Home, our author, Margie Carr, recalls the leaders and influencers who settled here. Carr, who grew up in suburban Kansas City, earned a bachelor's and master's degree and a doctorate in economic education from the University of Kansas and now lives in Lawrence. She writes and works as a volunteer children's advocate for the Court-Appointed Special Advocates, or CASA, of Douglas County. And I don't want to create a mad rush, but we only have one book left for sale. Completely sold out, but please look for the book. Please look for the book at bookshop.org or wherever you purchase your books from our independent bookstores around town. And now, please join me in welcoming Margie Carr.
Well, thank you all for being here. This was a lot of years in the making. And those of you who know me and who are here probably will be like, you know, I've been talking about the amazing men and women of Montgall for the last 10 years. So you kind of are like, probably like, phew, okay, well, maybe she'll start talking about something else now. I don't know. And those of you who don't know me very well, now you do, because that's what I've been talking about for 10 years. So, and my kids, of course, who are all here. This book, a lot of people helped with the assemblage of this book, and I couldn't have done it without one person in particular, and she happens to be on the cover of the book, Gwen Russell Calderon. She has lived in the same home on that street for okay, I thank you for not making me 90 years. So she celebrated her 90th birthday in April. And Gwen, would you mind standing up and say hello? She said she was going to look for... There she is on her street in front of an elm tree. Oh, the one in front. You are the young lady in the front with a light colored bow in your hair. The one on the left, yes, that's good. With the bear, and she looked for the bear. She tried to find Teddy, but couldn't find Teddy to bring Teddy. Teddy, who's 87, probably. But thank you, Gwen, for coming, and thank you for everything that you helped me do with this. It was a lot. Like I said, it was a long time coming. But this book, these are photos of Montgall from, actually they were in the crisis in February of 1912, and that house on the corner that somebody told me oh, look at this little laser. This house right here is 2444 Montgall. That is the southwest corner of the street. And Gwen's home, can you see your home? I don't think you can see. Yeah. I don't think you can see your house from here, but you're just down the street. Is that your house right there? Okay, 2434. And your parents moved into this house, right? And I do tell a story about this house is the house that Miss Bluford lived in. Lucile Bluford lived in this house for 70 years, or 21 to 98 when she moved out. But she lived in this home, and your dad used to watch her on the late nights to make sure she got in safely because she parked in front of the house. So Gwen, I love that story, and it's in the book, so it's, but anyway, thank you, Gwen. Thank you for being here, and everybody else. So it took me, this isn't a book about one person or one house. It is a book about a street and the 16 houses that were on the street. And so there are a lot of people and a lot of things that happen. And the fact that I, wanted to do that, I tried pitching it to several people, and I know that I stumbled over the how to best say it, but I think my elevator pitch would be, this is a story about a street pre-Jim Crow, during Jim Crow, and post-Jim Crow. So it kind of is sort of the evolution of a street throughout 20th century America. And as you can, let's see, there's the house, there's 2444, the house. Gwen, yours is right there. And the back houses, this is a Sanborn map of I think from the 1930s. And the book is organized by chapters of the individual homes. So the first chapter is Rufus Montgall, and I explain who he was, and how the street got its name for him. But then after his story, it is chapters for the individual homes. And these homes on this side, the east side of the street, they came a little bit later. So some of them are there's an earlier Sanborn map of the street from 1909, and it's all these on the top are still there, but it's only one or two that are on the bottom. So like the Gamble's house, the Franklin's house, some of the others, Perry's house, they came later. But the amazing thing about Montgall, and I think the before, during, and after Jim Crow, is that during that time when African Americans, lived in a colony. I mean, there was a colony and a nation. I think somebody said that they built the institutions that served the black community. And so many of the institutions that served Kansas City's black community came from this street. And to me, it was just amazing. And I was, one of the things that some of my neighbors are here, and I would come to the Missouri Valley Room, learn a bunch of stuff about the amazing people at Montgall, go home to my house in Lawrence and tell Margaret and Will about what I learned today at the library and like what I learned at school. And so it was, a long time coming. And the other thing about it is I struggled with, should I tell this story? I don't know. I don't feel worthy of telling this story. This isn't my, I grew up in the segregated, Johnson County in one of J.C. Nichols' homes, and I could kind of see what happened. And the thing about having done the research and writing the story is what I have seen is that, like, my narrative and my understanding of history is you work hard, you study, you go to school, you learn, you do the right thing, and you get success, and you move on, and then your children get more than and can carry it on. And what I realized writing this is that after the fall of Jim Crow, some other things were in the works that kind of happened, and it sort of made that narrative and that understanding really not make as much sense to me. And before I started this book, my knowledge of Black history was more isolated, and I would kind of describe it as like, oh yes, I know about Frederick Douglass. He lived during the Civil War. He was, I know about W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a scholar. He started the NAACP. And so I would have these little isolated bits, and I didn't really have the framework to be able to put this together into a real meaningful understanding of the story. And so I just think it's an important way to look at it. And I struggle with discussions of race. I don't know. It's hard for me, and I think it's hard for a lot of people of my age to bring up things, because you don't want to say anything that is you don't want to make a mistake. And so what that does is that we don't have discussions, and we don't talk, and we don't really can't learn from one another, and not being together for and not living in close neighborhoods together. It's different, and it's hard, so I know I will struggle, and I apologize. I want to not do that and do that, but anyway, so that's what this is about. But so I'm going to talk a little bit about the institutions that came and emanated from Montgall Avenue. And if there is one thing that you take away from tonight, it is the role of teachers and how many teachers lived on Montgall during the first half of the 20th century. And this is not all of them. This isn't even half of them. This is just a select few of men and women that I found good pictures of and that I talk about in the book a little bit. But most of them lived on Montgall for decades, some 7, 8, 9 decades. Not all of them. Oh, go back. But here on the corner, up here, this is Hezekiah Walden. He did not live there for decades. He only lived there for a couple of years, but he lived at 2442. And his story, he kind of had an interesting time, not a very good time in Kansas City, and there is kind of a violent history to his time on Montgall. And so I'll let you read the book, because it's in there. But that's Hezekiah Walden. Next to him is Arthur Pittman. He taught at Lincoln High School for 40 years. He taught math, and he had 4 children. His children who grew up with Gwen, and I heard that he introduced the Blufords to St. Augustine's, and I think he introduced Miss Bridie to St. Augustine's, so where you still go to church. And so he had his 4 kids, and he lived at 2449. Anna Jones, she lived in that corner house on Montgall. She is an amazing woman. She lived in the same house that Bluford lived in before Bluford. She could trace her family story back to slavery, when her great-great-grandfather came on a ship, and was sold to the Jeffries family of North Carolina, and she lived there. Her great-grandfather's, Charles's son, Alan, became a blacksmith, and he was able to earn money, and he earned so much money that he bought his freedom. And then he earned more money, and he bought his wife's freedom, and he earned more money, and he bought his child's freedom, and he earned more, and then he bought his father's freedom. So that was the very last slave he purchased, and things were getting kind of a little sketchy, a little scary in North Carolina about the 1830s, and so they moved. They went to Oberlin, Ohio, and her father was one of the first graduates of Oberlin College that had started to take black students. It became a real mecca for runaway slaves. A lot of runaway slaves went there. And then the 1840s, they lived there for a few years, and then her father, with the Fugitive Slave Act, came, and he kind of decided, I don't know about Ohio, this is getting a little scary. So they go to Canada, which is where she was born. And her father knew John Brown, and I mean, it's just amazing. So she came to Kansas City in 1892, taught at Lincoln High School, and you can kind of see by her writing and stuff, she's very Victorian and very, prim and proper, and she had very, the lessons that she taught her girls were very, ladylike, and she felt like a woman, women should be a little bit, behave and not get into too much trouble. But yet she was a suffragist, and she wrote, letters to try to get women the right to vote. Next to Anna Jones is Gwen's dad, Joshua Russell, who came in 1928 to 2434 Montgall Avenue. He was recruited from Topeka and to teach auto mechanics, and he lived on the block for 60 some years, and in the first 2434, and then the house across the street. And very well loved, very, very well known in the community, and a very loved man. On the bottom row is Carolyn Bridey. That is 2434 Montgall, and that is Gwen's godmother, and that is the home where the Russells came to live. And Miss Bridey was beloved at Lincoln High School too. She taught Latin, and then she later went and earned her master's degree at University of Chicago, and was a counselor at Lincoln until her death in the 1950s. And then the very bottom row is John Bluford, who came when Anna Jones retired in 1919. She sold her house, and the Blufords moved in. And John Bluford taught chemistry at Lincoln High School until the 40s, and he was very well known. But I think I loved this quote. I just listened to this podcast not very long ago, Amani Perry, talking about schools in the Jim Crow era in the South. Her focus was really on the South, and that's where her research is. And she had that quote, and I had to back it up like several times because I love that quote so much. And I thought, yes, these are the men and women that I spent so much time talking about it, how much I love them. And you think about the importance of education to these folks whose relatives know what it's like not to be free, and so they understood the importance of freedom and how literacy, if you couldn't be taught to read, how important it is to read, and the importance of learning about civics and democracy and what America is. And I think what they understood is that America is really more than just a place. It really is an idea, and it is, it's the social studies teacher and me talking, so sorry about that. But anyway, I do appreciate teaching, and there's the institution that most of them taught at. That this is the third location for Lincoln High School. Anybody here a Lincoln High graduate? There are several. I can imagine how the way that the students talk about Lincoln High School and how important it is to the black community, I don't think you can overstate that. And I don't think you can overstate the importance of Montgall Avenue was to Lincoln High School. So I really, it's a hallowed institution, and really important then, really important now, and really important for, I hope, for a long, long time. These are two more teachers who lived on Montgall, and they lived next door to Gwen, to 2436 Montgall, and this is Hugh Oliver Cook. He started off teaching math, and he went back and he got his administrator's degree, and he was the principal. And he was the longtime principal. And he changed Lincoln High School. I just want to tell you, when he started in the 1840s, I wrote down what the curriculum was at Lincoln in 1904. I was looking at the yearbooks. And so when Hugh Oliver Cook arrived at Lincoln, the courses were literature and drawing, natural sciences, mathematics, Latin and history, English and music. So it was this very classic Western civilization kind of focus. And by the time Hugh Oliver Cook, by 1928, so 24 years later, the curriculum, this is what was in the 1928 yearbook: cabinet making, home economics, ROTC, painting, carpentry, mechanical drawing, and art. So in addition to all the other stuff, he brought in a whole new kind of curriculum to meet the needs of his students and to try to encourage them to remain in school. And the Cooks, this quote was in the Kansas City Call when he retired in 1943. And they go hand in hand with the history of the Black community in Kansas City. And I think it's true. Lincoln High School was where he spent his time, but he also, the Paseo YMCA, he helped start that down at 20th and Vine. They did this home seeker savings and loan to collect money to loan to people who wanted to buy homes or to fix up their homes. So many more things. Here on the left is Myrtle Cook. She also taught at Lincoln, but she didn't. As soon as they married, she left. This was her second. Her first husband died, and his first wife died. So it was a second marriage for both of them. But they were definitely important figures in Kansas City and on Montgall. But Myrtle was really more known for her work. Really, she had more of a national profile, I would say, because she was the Legal Defense Fund for the NAACP. Actually 100 years ago this summer, the NAACP had their big convention here, and there are lots of good stories about some of the speakers and some of what was happening then, and many of the men and women from Montgall went to the conference, and she was selected to the Legal Defense Fund to help the men. If you know the story about after World War I down in Houston, there was a riot where they were being mistreated and they were in jail. These black soldiers were being really mistreated after World War I, and they were down at a camp in the Houston area, and there was kind of a riot, and people died, and the soldiers, everybody kind of felt like they really didn't get, justice. It was not served very well. So they were going to they were asking help from the NAACP and for their legal representation, and Myrtle was part of that. They retired and moved to California. They followed Anna Jones to California, but they were, really important people in Kansas City. So the schools were obviously one of the institutions that was very important to Black life, civic life. Another thing that was super important to Black civic life that kind of really was Montgall Avenue. I mean, there were 3 newspaper editors that lived on Montgall. Probably the most famous is, no, Lucile Bluford. Hard to say, I don't know. The founder of the Call or Lucile Bluford, probably Lucile Bluford, it's a little more famous, but Chester Franklin, the founder of the Call, and he, there's the building, which is still there, and they're still, you know, doing the good work of what the press and all that. But there is a long quote about the importance of the black press. And when I read this quote, I couldn't, you know, I thought, oh, yes, exactly. But Dowdell Davis was a sales manager of the Call, and they were at a conference. And he starts off his speech. He gives this great speech to honor Franklin, as a matter of fact. And he says, how many times have you seen an account of a Negro social function? From the attention given it from the mass media, one would assume that Negroes never got married, never received promotions, never established businesses or went on vacation trips, or bought homes, had babies, went to college, wore smart frocks, or even attended church. One would imagine from the studied indifference of radio and television, with a few notable exceptions, that there were no Negro singers, dancers, musicians, artists, actors, announcers, or newsworthy happenings outside of perhaps Jackie Robinson and Dr. Ralph Bunche. What the Negro citizen wants is nothing more nor less than what every other man wants. That it is withheld makes it no less desired nor avidly sought. And so I thought, yeah, that kind of sums it up right there of why the importance of the black press. And this he goes on to say later in the speech, you know, a means of self-expression. It tells people where to go, where you can buy, who's going to treat you fairly, where you can get a drink, you know, a soda on a hot day, or you know, give you gas or use the bathroom facilities at the place. So that's Chester Franklin, founder of the Kansas City Call in 1919. He did more than just found the Call. He was the founder of the Call. He really was a civil rights activist. He probably would tell you that the thing he was most proud of was during World War II, he opened up the defense industry to black workers. Before, he had read an article about they were opening up the Fairfax plant, and the government the defense was giving a big contract to a company in California, and they were going to, you know, to do a plant, you know, change the plant and to make aircraft and ammunition. And he said, well, yeah, we're going to hire Negroes, but they're only going to be in janitorial services. And Franklin read that, and he was like, oh, no. So he organized, he talked to other, you know, leaders from other, you know, cities around the country, and told FDR that, you know, we're going to have a rally in Washington like you've never seen before, and we are going to, so that kind of encouraged, I think probably with Eleanor Roosevelt too, kind of encouraged him to pass the executive order that opened up the defense industry. So if you were going to take a defense contract, you had to promise to hire, you were going to be able to hire African Americans, or you would. And his lovely wife is next to him. This is Ada Krogman, and she has a great story too. Her family story is wonderful. And the two of them had a wonderful, wonderful romance, and there are letters that he wrote to her. Her letters back to him didn't survive, but his letters to her, maybe it's because she outlived him, and so she didn't save her. The collection, I don't know, maybe he didn't save them when she would write them, or I don't know. She was more sentimental and she saved his. I don't know. You could read, you go to the archive, the Black Archives in the Franklin collection, and you can see all these wonderful, beautiful letters that he wrote to her when she was traveling. She traveled around the country for a time in the late 20s with a show that she had written, Milestones. And it was all about teaching African American history. And you know, she said, people don't know about African American history. We need to teach you. We need to do a better job. So she wrote this show, and it traveled around. But that is a really important institution that emanated. Oh, and like I said, that she wasn't the only one. There was another, Frances Jackson, also a newspaper editor on Montgall Avenue. She was earlier, much earlier than the Call, but there are editorials that she wrote. She was a city editor of the Call, and then of course Lucile Bluford lived on Montgall, and she took over for Chester Franklin. She in her oral history said that because they were neighbors, that he taught her how to parallel park. So sometimes when I'm there on Montgall, I like to think about Franklin teaching Miss Bluford, how to parallel park. I can imagine how, okay, you pull up next to the car, and you know, all those little lessons about parallel parking. But yeah, she just definitely was an important institution that emanated from Montgall Avenue. And I have this, I kind of thought, okay, yeah, Lucile Bluford, institution. That's who she was. She is an Kansas City institution. And I put these photos of her. Oh, that one photo, I didn't show her of her nephew, but I put these photos of her at her different stages of her life. And because her story kind of is traced throughout the book. After the fall of Jim Crow, really the last third of the book is kind of like, you know, the lens of the street through her eyes as the editor of the Call. And so she could kind of see, you know, the redlining and the white flight that was taking place and happening, and she was definitely important. But the top picture is her freshman year at Lincoln High School. That is, I love that picture. Imagine her in 1924 when she entered Lincoln, and she loved Lincoln. In 1928, she had this. She wrote about Lincoln. Ah, cruel fate, you are indeed unkind. Why must we leave our dear old Lincoln, which we have learned to love so dearly? Why must we leave the smiling faces and warm hearts of our dear teachers and the guiding hand of our beloved principal? You, Oliver Cook. We are going out into the cold, wide world, but all through our life's journey, when the stumbling blocks come our way, we will be comforted by the vivid memories of our days at Lincoln High School. And I sometimes think about, how the culture of the community at Lincoln, and definitely, her words just summed it up. But I added these other pictures because I kind of wanted to show her at different stages of her life. There's a little guy in this picture, and you can't see him, but that's her nephew, Guy in Blue. She didn't have children. She never got married, and she didn't have children. But she loved her brother's kids, and Guy in Bluford became an astronaut, and he was the first black astronaut to go into outer space aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger, but before right before the explosion. But if any of you are Abbott Elementary fans, at the very end of at the very last show, they would go to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, which is where Guyan grew up. And one of the kids says, "I'm going to be an astronaut like Guyan Bluford." And I about had a heart attack because I thought, oh my gosh, shout out to Guyan Bluford. Yay, you. So I love that show, and I was so excited when I saw that. This is Bluford in the 1939, from 1939 to 1943. She probably did what she's best well known for as far as nationally, maybe not in Kansas City, but nationally. And she sued the University of Missouri for admission to a graduate school of journalism. At that time, she could not go to KU or MU. None of the kids from Lincoln or from Montgall Avenue, the black kids, could not go to MU because not until 1950 did they allow black students. So she, like many of other kids, went to University of Kansas, and I live in Lawrence, so it was easy to do some of the research there, but she was an editor of the UDK, and although her name isn't on these editorials, you could just tell which ones were written by, it's just like, I wonder who wrote through the lens of, seeing race through the colored lens, and who covered Langston Hughes covered the KU, and who covered, I wonder who that was. So you could kind of see, and those editorials that definitely had that, were more interested in race, you could tell that she really was very optimistic and upbeat, and I don't know if people knew her. I know you knew her, but would you describe her as optimistic about life? Oh, yeah, very, very optimistic and very joyful. And the 1928 yearbook, Will Lucile Ever Express Gloom? And I just thought, oh, yeah, I wonder. She just remained upbeat all of her life. But this is her, I think, in Union Station going to the University of Missouri when she sued them. She sued them 11 times. She lost 11 times. They would not let her in, even though the judge said, you've got a graduate school at the University of Missouri, because it was separate but equal, and she was trying to prove that the graduate program at the university, at the Lincoln Institute, the segregated school, didn't have the same resources as the University of Missouri did for program, and they said, You're gainfully employed. This is more about agitation than education. You're employed. That's what the judge said, and so she lost. But she went back and fought some more. Her dad, she said that her dad got very nervous and was very anxious every time she took the train to Columbia, because he didn't want her. He was very afraid for her, and she wanted to go to Howard, which is where her dad went, but he didn't want her to go to Howard. He was kind of he liked her to stay close to home, so she went to KU, and this is another picture of her during those times that she was suing MU, and then this final picture is of her later in life and her. But I love thinking about Miss Bluford. When it came to civil rights, there's a story in the book about that she tells in her oral history when she's at KU, and she has darker skin, but her friend had lighter skin, and was able to purchase tickets to this movie, to the show, and sit on the floor. And she was supposed to, the black students were supposed to sit up in the balcony, and so she and her friend just go down and they sit on the floor, and the movie's getting ready to start, and then obviously somebody in the crowd was highly offended by Miss Bluford daring to sit in the crowd, and she, and so they tell one of the ushers, and the ushers are going around looking for, trying to get their attention, and she said, I just, looked around, we were just kind of, kind of like, nah. And finally, the crowd was just like, get the movie started, start the movie. So the poor usher was just like, who's going to start the movie? And so I don't know what the person who was offended did, but they obviously walked out. And there's another story about a friend of hers when downtown cafeterias were segregated. She and a friend, Virginia Oldham, they would go to the Forum Cafe downtown, and and she would not grab food, but she was with her friend Virginia, who was white, and Virginia would take food and say, what would you like? Would you like some? Would you like the Jell-O today? And the people would just serve, behind. Some people would get upset, and then they just go sit down and eat. And I just thought, oh, you rebel, that's I love thinking about her going and doing that. But later in her life, when the Black Panthers were coming along in the 60s and Freedom Inc., she used to go. she would go to the city council meetings, and she said they would just shout us down anytime anybody tried to talk. They would just start talking and yelling, and I think they just need to have more, respect. And so she obviously was by that time of her career was a little bit more like, come on now, we gotta, play by the rules. But I think more of the activists were I don't know how much time I have, so I'm gonna, oh my gosh, I thought this might happen, that I have way more to say than time for questions. So I'm gonna zoom through the years. Oh, I didn't even talk about Perry and Frederica. Another couple, power couple on Montgall Avenue. John Perry lived at 2449? 2451, that's what I said. Yeah, 24, for like 60 decades, and he was a physician, and he started Wheatley-Provident Hospital. He had a different idea about segregation. I mean, most of the people I've talked about really were they were anti-Jim. I mean, they did not like Jim Crow. They were trying to get integration. But he was a physician, and he really understood how valuable. He thought, these black schools are amazing. What do you want? What are you trying to do? And so his approach was a little bit different. And but yeah, he came to Kansas City, started a hospital. Really cool. All that. Frederica Sprang Perry. She does what I do today. She works with children in the foster care system. Back in the day, the Niles Home for Negro children, I have a picture somewhere, but I don't think, we're not gonna get to that. You could only live there until you were 12. 12-year-old girls, if you didn't have parents and you were in the foster care system, you had to leave. And so, so they would often be sent to juvenile detention. And so she kind of understood, well, these girls can't really live in, I mean, that's not fair. You can't be in juvenile detention. But so she started the Big Sisters Home. And there are lots of and it was on Brooklyn, 25th and Brooklyn. But her grandfather, Frederick Douglass, so really important family. John Bluford, when he was at Howard University, lived with that family because that was, that's where he lived when he was in school. Homer Roberts. Where's Jerry Sanders? Where are you, Jerry? Yeah. Who wrote the book on Homer Roberts? But he lived on Montgall Avenue too. He was another one on Montgall, but he was a World War I veteran. He encouraged people to sign up for the war, and if you go to the 325th Field Signal Division, you Google that, there's a video of them setting the communication lines in the trenches, and I kept trying to look for Homer, for Roberts, but I didn't see him. But after the war, he started Roberts Motor Mart. So I am going to stop because I know if there are questions, and I don't want to just talk. Yeah, Bob.
Sir. Oh, well, sir, when you have a question, you're already doing it, so you're a great example. But everybody else, as you have questions, as Carrie mentioned at the beginning, please step up to the microphone as this gentleman is doing so that people at home can hear you also. And I'll also interrupt if we have questions from YouTube and intersperse them with people's questions here. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
Okay. How did these people end up on one block? And how, I mean, in your opinion, was it word of mouth through the school system? Like, oh, she's a teacher, so I want to be a teacher too at Lincoln, and I want to move next to her. Or was that part of it, or how did they all end up?
I think there were very, young women moved to Montgall and lived with many of the families. Frances Jackson, the Jacksons, before Carolyn Bridie. Carolyn Bridie was one of those young women who got a job at Lincoln High School, needed to live in a nice neighborhood, in a respectable neighborhood where she knew she would be safe. And they were limited, and I think word of mouth was one of the reasons.
Right.
When Hugh Oliver Cook moved to Lincoln, or moved to Montgall, it was an integrated street though. And Anna Jones, it was an integrated street. And there was an evolution the white families who ended up leaving, and then it became, you know, like a mecca for unbelievable men and women.
Ma'am, please step up to the microphone if you've got a question.
Actually, he took my question away.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to expand on that just a little bit and just ask you, did you know of any of the black real estate agents that were in the area that may have actually steered them to Montgall? And no, it was not the only block.
No, it wasn't the only block. No, it wasn't the only block. I just I couldn't imagine doing the whole story. You know, Thomas Fortune was a real estate agent, and I wondered if there were people who steered them. I found the advertisement for the home 2436 Montgall, and it was in a black newspaper, even though there were white people on the block. They were advertising in you know, to the black community. So it was obviously an integrated street back in 1904 when Cook moved in. But I think word of mouth, and I think, you know, it maintained, it was a wonderful community for many, I mean, it still is a wonderful community. I write about the street when I was down there, and as like, really, you know, I feel bad about the way I describe it sometimes a little bit today, because there's something going on Montgall Avenue right now, and so many of the houses are being fixed up. I thought the Cook's house was going to be torn down because the garage was being torn down, and I thought it was going to be, oh, that's not a good sign. But there, like 3 or 4 have been bought and fixed up recently and sold. 4 of them have been rehabbed, and they are beautiful. They are beautiful. When I was there to deliver the book a couple of weeks ago, those boys were out there playing football, and the KU flag. I just thought, oh, I love this. I was, yeah. But I was, you know, it made me very, very happy. Not that they're Jayhawks, but you know, but I love Jayhawks. I'll show you more pictures just while we're.
And how far away was the baseball field from Montgall?
Not very far. Not very far. I don't know for 100% sure, but it's in that area. There's a park. Yeah. What?
Just on the north side of Lincoln.
Yeah, north side. Oh, just right. It is right there. And Lincoln's right there on 22nd and Woodland. Yeah, so it's not very far at all.
Yeah, because a lot of the people, the barbecue places were there. And people use their yards to park cars and make some nice little money.
Oh, you had to go to the game. Yeah, the baseball, yes, love the baseball. Love the Monarchs.
How did you get the idea for this book? I mean, what was it that drew your attention to this block of Montgall?
This was a total accident, and I do tell this story, but I grew up in Kansas City, but I'm not a historian. I was an educator before I worked in the child welfare system, but I was writing a story for the Journal World about the 150th anniversary of a church, of a historic black church, and I had heard that W.E.B. Du Bois had spoken at the church during the 1920s, and I thought, oh well. Again, I was back in my day of, oh, I know who he is, my little bubble of that he's important in black history. And so I dug in. Somebody told me that his papers were all online, and so I started to Google, or I started to search, and I kept seeing Montgall Avenue. I kept seeing letters from Montgall. And 2444 Montgall, 2447 Montgall, 2453 Montgall. And I thought, what in the world? One was from a World War I veteran. That ended up being Homer Roberts. One was from Anna Jones, and she was talking about dynamite attacks on Montgall. And one was from Ada Krogman, Chester Franklin's wife's father inviting him to the home because they had been friends. His father taught with Du Bois, and I thought, I think there's something here about this amazing street. And so then I just slowly, as I went further and further and further into it, I found amazing men and women, and I thought, I gotta write this, somebody's gotta write this book, because it's not gonna write itself, you know. And so anyway, that's kind of how it started many years ago.
I want to commend you for your dedication and courage in spending the amount of time that it took to put this together. But my question is, this is such important information for the community at large to digest. Beyond writing it and publishing it, do you have goals for how this information could be disseminated to a wider community so that they would understand about all that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I had these little pipe dreams, like, oh yeah, somebody's gonna pick this up, it's gonna be a Netflix series, and it's gonna be famous. But to be more serious, because that is a very serious question. I really, you know, the patterns of history as they come, and you know, and knowing more about Black history is so important for all of us, and to know about what can happen when we don't, when we stop caring about each other, and we don't, you know, and it's easier to do if we don't know about each other. So stop caring. So I am fully interested and fully. I would love to share the story as much as possible with anybody who would care to listen, and to share it on, and pass it on to other people. I think just we all need to, you know. But I'm a history teacher, so of course I have to say that. So, you know.
We have a question from someone at home. This person has written, has the neighborhood proven to be resistant at all to the gentrification we see in other neighborhoods?
So far, have all the families who have moved in, I think it's still so far so good still. Black families who bought the houses recently?
But recently,
Ma'am, we won't be able to hear you unless you go to the microphone.
have houses.
Can you go to the microphone, Gwen? Okay. Sorry. They're going to bring it to the microphone.
Thank you. Recently, the rehab houses, the house next door to me, 2436, there's a Black family. 2440 next door are two young white ladies. The house next door at 2442 is a Mexican lady and her daughter. And recently, 2449 across the street, there's another white lady, and she has a son, but he's not there at the house. He's away in school. But all the families that have moved in have become like our block and the other 2400 block were always like one big family. And the new people that have moved in have fallen right into that. The neighbor at 2440 just mowed my grass yesterday.
Yay! Let's hear that.
Before you sit down, I was interested how you two got connected to share your stories.
About how we got connected, Gwen. Oh, I remember it. I remember it very well. But you don't have the microphone, my dear. I'll let you share. I'll let you. I've been talking so much. You might not remember. Well, I remember I was over at the Black Archives, and our friend, oh, I don't need this, because sorry. I'll give that to you. Our mutual friend of ours, Michael Sweeney, was over at the Black Archives, and I was talking to him about what I was finding and what I was doing, and he goes, I'd kind of like to go see that block. And I said, well, let's go over there. I'll show you. So we went down there, and Michael is white, as you know, and we were walking down the street. And Gwen, right at that time, Michael was working on compiling all the Lincoln High School yearbooks. And somehow he knew that you had access to a bunch, and you were going to come in and...
Someone else that was working with the Black Archives knew that I had multiple Lincoln yearbooks. Miss Bridie, my godmother that I lived with, she had yearbooks from 1919. And I had some of those up to 1951. And I had loaned them to Michael, and he has gotten all of those books online. You can go to the Lincoln website and look up anybody's yearbook page.
Yeah, it is a wonderful, even just for this presentation, I was going back and using that archive that he put together.
So then Michael tells Margie about me and Montgall and the yearbooks, and we've been working together for 9 years.
Yeah. We'll be together longer. Me too. Yeah, and I went
Can you
to...
tell about the Cook's purchase of the house when they had the meeting?
The Cook's
To decide to sell it to blacks.
Oh, that story. Yeah, that story of they believed that.
When the Cooks first purchased their house, they didn't realize they had sold the house to a black man until his wife and sons came. So they had a neighborhood. There was a large Jewish population in that whole area called Prospect Park. And they had a meeting, and they decided to sell the two 2,400 blocks. That was 24th Street to Howard, which is now 24th Terrace, and then Howard to 25th, to sell those 2 blocks to black people. And that is how we were just like this little island until the early 50s. 25th Street on our block, that it was the end, and there were white people completely on all 4 sides of us. So we grew up in an integrated neighborhood.
But you couldn't go to the elementary school.
We couldn't go to the school that was right around the block.
No.
On 24th and Prospect. We had to go all the way across town to Wendell Phillips on 24th and Vine. And I guess when I was in the 4th grade, the neighborhood had begun to change, and they changed the Irving School to Booker T. Washington. And then we only had to go around the corner to go to school.
Yeah.
Can I ask what's the occasion of the photograph, Mrs.? I just want to know, what is the occasion of the photograph on the cover of the book? Was there a special...
My sister and I were just playing out in front with our teddy bears.
Somebody asked what was the occasion, and Gwen just said it was playing outside.
That tricycle, we never ever saw another one like it.
See it on that picture.
It had a hand, you can't see it because Teddy's in the way. It had a handbrake on it. And we never ever saw another one like it.
And Gwen brought a suit tonight that was from Tuskegee, right? Made out of...
The fabric is made from sweet potato fiber by Dr. Carver. And Miss Bridie's cousin was married to Lawyer Calloway, and somehow he came into possession of the fabric and had a suit made. And after he died, his wife had the suit altered into a suit for herself. Then after her death, Bridie inherited the suit, and she wore it to school 2 or 3 times a day. And I still have it, and it's in perfect condition.
I know, we should all wear sweet potato fiber. I love sweet potatoes.
We have one more question. Sir?
Yes, you answered one of the things I was wondering, because I lived at 2641 Agnes back in 47 or 48, and at that time, 27th Street was the land. And I was just wondering back there then, where did colored folks live in that area? I presumed that all of it was mostly white at that time, at that particular time.
Well, in the late 40s or something, they went past 25th Street. And then 27th Street became the boundary.
Yes.
And then it eventually moved on. And on there were no black families on Benton and on the other side, like Agnes. And then at that same time, they started moving in that area.
As new homes were built up after the war, and yeah. So.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you, Ms. Carr, for being here with us and telling us about this wonderful piece of history.